Hey everybody, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. We've got a really terrific Figured Out Baseball podcast for you today. I'm more excited about this podcast than I have been for a podcast in a while. We're being joined today by Dave Serrano. He's currently the head coach at Cal State Northridge. I'm really excited to talk to Coach Serrano, who's arguably one of the biggest names in college baseball and someone who's been through so many things and has so much to teach all of us that are listening to this, no matter what your position is in baseball or if you're just a college baseball fan. I'm so excited about this one. I'm going to go through the bio for Coach Serrano before we jump into questions with him, so you get to know everything that, well, a lot of what you need to know about him to see all that he's done if you're not familiar. He is a Cerritos, California native. He played collegiately at Cerritos College from 1983 through 1985. That's a junior college, but he was there for 3 years. We'll get to that probably in this podcast at some point. His last year there, he turned himself into a junior college All-American. In 1986, he transferred to Cal State Fullerton and played 1 season there under the legendary head coach Augie Garrido. He then began his college coaching career in 1988. From 1988 through 1994, he was an assistant coach at Cerritos College. Most of that time was spent under the legendary George Horton. While at Cerritos as a coach, the team won 5 conference championships and 1 state title. And the state junior college program or system in California, the junior college teams play one another, so a state title is equivalent to kind of like a national title, but they don't play any further than that. So they won it all in one of those seasons while he was at Cerritos. Then from 1995 through 1996, he was an assistant coach at Tennessee, University of Tennessee. They went to the NCAA tournament both of his seasons at Tennessee, and the 1995 team went to the College World Series for the first time at UT in 44 years. Then from 1997 through 2004, he was the pitching coach and recruiting coordinator back at Cal State Fullerton. While he was at Fullerton, that team went to 7 regionals. They made 4 trips to the College World Series. The 2004 team won the national championship, and also in 2004, Coach Serrano was named the Baseball America Assistant Coach of the Year. From 2005 to 2007, he was the head coach at UC Irvine. In his 3 years there, the team went to 2 NCAA regionals. The 2007 team won 47 games. That was a school record. They advanced to the College World Series for the first time in school history. And also in 2007, Coach Serrano was named the Baseball America National Coach of the Year. The springs of 2008 through 2011, he was the head coach at Cal State Fullerton. That team went to a super regional in each of his first 3 seasons. They went to the College World Series in 2009. In 2010, in the summer of 2010, Coach Serrano was the pitching coach for the USA Baseball Collegiate National Team. Then in 2012, he was named the head coach at Tennessee. He was there from 2012, the spring of 2012, through the spring of 2017. In the summer of 2012, he was the head coach for the USA Baseball Collegiate National Team. He spent 2018 as the pitching coach at West Virginia University. In 2019, while working for Diamond Baseball Academy, he also spent that spring covering games and writing about games for Baseball America. He was hired to be the head coach at Cal State Northridge in June 2019. Overall, Coach Serrano has been to the College World Series 7 times in his coaching career. He's been to 16 NCAA regionals. He has been to the NCAA tournament 6 times as a head coach. In 14 seasons as a collegiate head coach, he has compiled a record of 456 wins to 307 losses. And again, one of the biggest names in college baseball. He has coached under some of the biggest names of all time in college baseball. Just a guy with an incredible wealth of knowledge and experience. Coach Serrano, I cannot thank you enough for choosing to be on the podcast with us today.
Jeff, I want to thank you, and I'm really excited about being able to talk baseball with you over the next hour or so, and open up about a lot of things that I've been able to experience over what I feel is a very blessed life of being involved with baseball and being able to lead young men to maybe not just championships, but to greater things in their life. So thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, and I know that that's something that you and I have spoken about before, just that there's more to this than just winning games. You know, I like talking with coaches who win. I like picking their brains and finding out what makes them tick and what goes on behind the scenes, but I also like talking to coaches who really get it. I'm I'm quite a bit younger than you, and there's a lot that I can learn from you, and I think there's a lot that everybody listening to this can learn. But I'd like to kind of start at the beginning with this, Coach Serrano, and just kind of uncover an interesting nugget. I don't know how much you talk about this or how much you don't, but your time as a player at Cerritos College. You spent 3 years there, which is unusual for a player at a junior college. Do you mind just kind of talking us through your experience there? You told me before we started recording, and I think it's worth bringing up on the while we're recording now, but just your time at Cerritos as a player.
Well, I really think, Jeff, going back to that comment you just made, I think the reason why coaches are made sometimes is what their career was like. And I think that's why my investment into players is so important to me, because if it wasn't for the investment in coaches and me, I wouldn't have had the career in baseball. And so I'm very proud to talk about that story. I was a local product, as you said. I grew up in Cerritos, prepped at Cerritos High School, was on great teams in high school, was around great players and great teams. But I was under the Mendoza line, I should say, in regards to ability. I was a pitcher. That was my trade. Didn't throw hard, threw the ball over the plate a lot, just didn't throw hard, didn't have great arm strength. That's the ability I was given. So I went to Cerritos College, which was a renowned, one of the best at the time, one of the best junior colleges in the state of California or the country. We didn't compete across the country like you shared, but we were one of the best programs. That was one of the best programs. And I went there, and I was recruited. They knew who I was. They were recruiting other players on our high school team, so they knew who I was when I played. And I went there, and I'm not ashamed to say, the first year, Jeff, I was buried. Cerritos recruited a lot of players. I remember there was at least 60 or 70 players that were kept for the fall, and I was at the bottom of the line. And I shared this with you before we went on. The only reason how the coaches knew my name was because going back to I was a strike thrower, and I threw batting practice every day my first year. And when I say batting practice, back in those days, it wasn't the platform at 45 feet with the L screen in front. It was batting practice from the rubber with my cleats on competitively every single day. And now I wouldn't throw 100 pitches. I'd throw 30 to 40 pitches. But I had that kind of resiliency in my arm, and throwing strikes, I was a good BP thrower. And that's probably why I wasn't performing, because that's what I was doing in the game, too. I was kind of a BP thrower. And had to learn the hard way, had to grow, had to get better. And that was kind of my mindset. I'll never forget this, because then I went to my redshirt freshman year, the next year, where I was able to play. The redshirt was lifted, and I pitched 1 inning. And I'll never forget this story. And this is a great story to share with parents, coaches, and players that are listening. Is I remember coming home my freshman year, and as parents do, because they have so much love for you, I remember my mom saying, Dave, the coaches must just not like you there. There must be a reason why you're not playing. And I immediately turned my mom's mindset around and said, no, Mom, that isn't true. They do like me. I'm just not good enough, and I have to get better. And I wish there'd be more of that went on within the players nowadays' minds, that I've got to get better. I don't need to make excuses why someone isn't playing me and why I'm not playing. I have to get better. And I did that. I ended up making an arm angle change. I was an over-the-top or high three-quarter guy that threw about 83 miles an hour, 84. And because growing up, and I'm making it very wordy, but I was one of those weird kids that threw a tennis ball, a wiffle ball, or a racquetball against my garage every single day. And I would mimic being every single guy in Major League Baseball. So I had every different arm angle you could throw. I could be Kent Colby, I could be Don Sutton, I could be Dennis Eckersley, names from way in the past. Well, one day down in the bullpen, my sophomore year, after I redshirted and only thrown 1 inning my redshirt freshman year, it was deep in the fall, and I wasn't pitching again. I wasn't pitching in ball. And I asked our pitching coach at the time, a guy named Jay Ortega, I said, will you watch me throw some pitches from underneath? And I threw some pitches from underneath, and his eyes opened up. And he says, hey, hold on real quick. He went down and got Coach Horton, who was the head coach, and had Coach Horton come down and said, watch Dave throw. And I had a great sinker from there, had a great slider from there. And when I say great, that's probably over-exaggerated. It was quality. It was much better than it was over the top. Well, I ended up getting the ball more that fall, which led to, in 1985, my sophomore year, ended up pitching as a starting pitcher and as a relief guy. And ended up going 12-1 that year with, I think, 5 saves. I'm not a stat guy. Just remember that because it's the best year of my career. And kind of just resurrected my career. And what you didn't say in the bio, and that was probably my fault for not saying that, is we won the state championship that year too. So I won it as a player and a coach at Cerritos College. And it was a great team. It was a superior team. I think out of all of us, if we had 20 sophomores on our team, I think all 20 got Division I scholarships. So it wasn't just about me having a good year. I was surrounded by good people. And I think that's kind of led into my coaching career, that has showed me it isn't about you. It's about putting good people around you that are going to make you look better. And that's why my mentality as a coach is you never quit on somebody. Someone can always develop to get better if they have the right mindset to be able to get better. So I went from a VP guy that was on the list every day, not getting his name on the list as a player to play, to a guy that was one of the key guys on that pitching staff that helped that team win a state championship in 1985, which led to a scholarship to Cal State Fullerton after my redshirt sophomore year. And I'll never forget this. My high school coach, Vern Brock, out of all respect to him, coming out of high school, he told me, he said, Dave, at the best, you're probably a Division III player. And that didn't make me mad. That motivated me. Not that there's anything wrong with Division III baseball at all, but it motivated me because my goal was to play in the major leagues one day, but playing Division I baseball at Cal State Fullerton was my major leagues in my mind.
That's an amazing story, and I don't know how many people would have come back for that third year after you're in college for 2 years. You redshirt once, you throw one inning the next year. I mean, I don't know how many people would have even given a shot the third year.
Well, let me add to that a little bit. That sophomore year, because we had a lot of talent at Cerritos. We had a lot of talent. I was able to recognize that, and I saw my days dwindling, and I actually thought for a brief time of maybe going somewhere else. And I actually, for that summer going into my sophomore year, I went and played a summer ball with Fullerton Junior College, which wasn't very far from my house, and went there for the summer and came back and told my parents, I made a mistake. I'm not around the same kind of people that I want to be around, that want to play at the top level, want to win a championship. And I went back almost on my hands and knees and asked Coach Horton, would you give me an opportunity to come back? And because I wanted to be around my friends and the people that had the same kind of work ethic as me. And going into November of that fall, I kind of thought I made a bad mistake because I still wasn't pitching until I made the arm change. But it was the best decision I've ever made to go back kind of home, quote unquote, and be around the people that I'd kind of grown up with over those 3 years, and we accomplished great things together.
You had such an incredible amount of success you're still having an incredible amount of success as a head coach. Do you ever look at players now that you're coaching and kind of see yourself like a guy that really is not as talented as his teammates, but somebody who really wants to be good, someone who really puts the time and effort in? And of course there are, thousands and thousands of players out there who aren't very good and they don't work especially hard. So they're not guys that you would necessarily want on your team on a 35-man roster as your 33rd, 34th, 35th guy, but there are a lot of guys out there that do. Do you ever see yourself and guys that you've recruited and coached over the years and just think like, I think it's worth sticking it out with this guy, and I think by senior year, he's going to be able to give us something, and maybe that's panned out at some point. Have you seen that? Have you recognized that in some other players you've coached?
Yes, I do. That's a great question, and I do. And let me go back. That's one of the reasons why I don't like the list that we have, the squad list that we have to have, the roster limit, because I say this and I share this all the time. If there was a roster limit when I was growing up, going through junior college, I wouldn't have made the team, and I wouldn't have got an opportunity to play on a state championship team. I wouldn't have been able to coach a state championship team. I wouldn't have been able to be part of a coaching staff of a national championship team, and all the things that I've been able to accomplish in my career would have been shortened because I wouldn't have made the team. But it's funny you asked that question, because a lot of the players I recruit are way better than I ever was. But it's work ethic, and that's the biggest thing I look at, is the work ethic and what you bring to the table. And I'm a firm believer, Jeff, is that, and I share this with our team, is that whether you're getting out of it what you want at that time, you need to bring something to the table to be part of the team. And what I mean by part of the team is like being part of the family. I think everybody needs that in their life to be able to succeed, either be part of a family or be part of a team. And I share that with the parents of the players that I coach, is that a lot of people don't recognize that when they're going through it, but they'll recognize it 10 or 20 years down the line, or maybe farther down the line, of how important it was to go through the things they went through as a member of that team. I think it leads to a lot of more successful things in your life, raising a family, being a husband, being part of a family, being part of a workforce. I think that all kind of goes together with being part of a team, and I see that a lot. But I do recognize that in kids. And if a kid has work ethic, even if he doesn't have the ability, if he has the work ethic, he could bring something to the table, and who knows what he'll end up being. And that's what I think is so special about baseball, maybe more than any other sport, is it isn't always the most talented guys. I've coached many guys that didn't have all the talent, but they had the heart and the desire and the work ethic, which allowed them to be good. And in football and basketball, sometimes it's about ability, sometimes it's about size and strength. That's where baseball is so different than those two other sports, is that size and strength doesn't always make the good, complete player.
Baseball is also a funny sport in that I've seen in the years that I've coached that teams that make a deep run in the playoffs, even if it's your conference tournament or teams that advance beyond that, and a lot of times major league teams are the same way, but you'll have a guy that did not play much of a role throughout the season that will all of a sudden, because of injury or because someone else wasn't playing well, all of a sudden gets a chance. And then all of a sudden, that 56-game season, in the first 50 games, they weren't a part of it. They didn't have much of a role in the last couple games of the season, and through the postseason, someone has a big role and steps up and plays a big part in what happens in the postseason. And I think that baseball is a game. I've always believed that baseball is a game that rewards you, but it doesn't reward you right away. In this way, I believe that baseball reflects your life. If you're a hitter, for example, and you're kind of slumping and you're not, and there's some things you're not doing very well or not doing right, when you make the adjustment, you're not going to go out the next day and get 3 hits. Baseball's not that way. Like, it's going to take some time. Baseball's too fair of a game for you to make a change and see results the next day. It's going to take some time until you see the results and until you sort of get what you've been working for. And I think it's just a game that will reward you if you stick it out most of the time. In one way or another, you're going to get out of it what you put into it at some point if you just stick with it.
I agree with you, and I have a saying that I say all the time: the game knows. And I'm sure you've heard that along the way sometimes. And right when you were talking about that, it reflected back to 2004, the national championship season. We got the losers bracket at home in our region, our super regional, or our regional, or actually it was a super regional then. And we had to, actually it was the regional, I'm sorry, before the super regional. And we were playing, we had to beat Pepperdine twice, and we were running low on pitching because we were coming out of the losers bracket. There's a left-handed pitcher named Scott Sarver, who had been, was in his first year, a transfer from Fullerton Junior College, and he had worked hard all year. Didn't have a great year for us, was a spotty left-handed pitcher. He was a left-handed pitcher, left-handed situational guy, had struggled his way, but had continued to work hard and stayed with himself. But we had to go to him. And he had to start the game against Pepperdine. And he ended up putting us on his back and carrying us, helping us get through that regional, beat Pepperdine, and advance to the super regional to eventually beat Arizona State to get to Omaha. And there's a lot of superstars on that team: Jason Windsor, who carried us through Omaha, and Kurt Suzuki. But it was Scott Sarver the guy that was probably number 8 or 9 on the pitching staff for the majority of the year, that because he stayed with himself, he didn't get down on himself, he wasn't pointing the fingers at other people and blaming other people why he wasn't succeeding. He got the ball in the biggest moment when our season could have been ended on a very good team, and got the ball and went 7 or 8 complete innings to allow us to beat Pepperdine. So it's stories like that I'm just echoing what you're saying. You're exactly right. The game knows and will reward, not always, but most of the time will reward those people that continue to work hard.
I like that a lot. The game knows, and the game does. And I think that anybody that plays or coaches for a long time has got some sort of saying like that they tell their team and they tell their guys, and it's certainly very, very true. I want to go back to something else you said a little while ago, Coach Serrano, just about you wish there was more of something that you experienced while you were playing at Cerritos, of just someone looking in the mirror and saying, the reason I'm not playing is because I'm not good enough. It's not because of the coaches don't like me, or it's not because of something political. And so after I coached in college, I coached high school ball for 1 year. It wasn't necessarily my cup of tea, but I tried it for a year, and I had a meeting with parents and players before the season started and just sort of told them that it doesn't matter to me what your last name is. It doesn't matter to me how much money you've donated to the program or what you've done in the past, or, what your standing is in the community. I'm going to play the guys that I think are going to help me win. And there's no reason that if you're not playing, or if your son's not playing, there's no reason for that, except I don't believe that you or your son can help the team. And that's something I want you to realize before we even get into this. I don't want the politics swirling around this team. And I think there's a lot of it's not something that is done a lot right now. You've been coaching since 1988. Is that something that you think has changed over time, or is that something that you've seen, for the last several decades, that players have a hard time when they're not playing? Players have a hard time looking in the mirror and saying that it's because of me, it's because of something I've done, or because I'm just not good enough. Is that something that's changed over time?
I think it has, Jeff. Sadly, I say that sadly. I think it has. I think entitlement has carried a lot of weight with that. Everybody thinks that they're supposed to get out of it, get everything out of it, and they don't have to work for something. And I think that's one of the problems. It's always someone else's fault instead of, as you said, look in the mirror. And I won't deny, I was a different kind of kid growing up. I was from a middle class. I mowed the yards. I had a job in high school. I worked at a grocery store and bagged groceries. So I had a work ethic, and that came from my uprising and my parents. And a lot of kids now, even the kids I coach today, a lot of kids don't have jobs, and so they don't know what it is to be responsible, to show up on time and get the work in. And I'll share this with what I shared with my team just the other day. We're not doing anything physically right now. We're only being able to do Zoom calls. And early on, we had a tough time of getting guys exactly on time to a Zoom call. Now, look back, Jeff, to when you played, and I know when I played, if I was late to anything that my coaches were involved in, I'd be scared to death that I wasn't going to get another chance ever before. Kids don't look at it that way anymore. They just think, well, I'm late, no big deal. I'm a good player, I'm still good. And I shared with my team, I said, if we're 100% on Zoom calls, or 100% showing up to practice, or 100% showing up to 6 a.m. weights when we start to do that again, don't pat yourself on the back. You're not doing a great job. You're just doing your job. You're doing the job you're supposed to do. That guy that shows up every day to work at 6 a.m. in the morning and works till 3 in the afternoon, he doesn't expect a raise at the end of the year for showing up on time. That's just doing his job. And I don't think people don't keep it in perspective like that. And so to answer your question, I have seen that kind of get lost a little bit, because it's become, and I'm not bashing travel ball, but I know when travel ball started about 15 to 20 years ago, when it really started getting heavy into sports, I think it stopped being about the team, and it became more about showcasing yourself. And it wasn't what the end result was of the game, because at the end of the day, the wins and losses, the team is more important than what you did that day. And so I think that's where it kind of got lost, is that we play travel ball to be seen, to get scholarships or signed, instead of what's most important for the team that day. And I think that's where kids have gotten confused by it.
And that's a two-edged sword because it's hard to kind of pinpoint exactly what happened there, because at some point college coaches stopped going out to high school games.
You're right.
And so it's become necessary to play travel baseball for anybody to see you. And then you play travel ball and everybody you're paying to play on that team. So as a parent, it's hard. As a coach, you can see why parents will get upset if so-and-so's not playing, because it's not high school ball where it's just the best player. Like, I paid a lot of money to be here. I'm doing a lot of traveling. Like, you got to give my kid a shot to get in front of somebody. So travel ball is such a weird thing to me, and it's necessary on the recruiting side, but I just think there's a lot of bad coming out of it. Of course, I think Rob Manfred thinks that travel ball is amazing because he's trying to turn Major League Baseball into travel baseball now, which is another podcast in general. But I think that it's hard to know exactly what came first, but I think you're right. Somewhere along the way, some priorities have changed and been lost. Now, how do you deal with that when kids get on campus? I mean, the travel baseball world tells the individual player that individual is the most important thing here. But we all know that a good team of any, not just a good college team, but a good college team, a good pro team, it's a bunch of guys who are fighting for the greater good of the team. How do you make that transition when guys get on campus, and how long does that take? Or do you have to recruit players that you have to be very careful to recruit players who already take that mentality and try very hard to avoid the player who does think that it's about me, it's not about the team? I mean, how do you go about just dealing with that and coping with that being kind of what travel baseball is about right now?
Well, it's not an easy job. It's not an easy task. And in the recruiting process, because it's gotten so escalated now that you don't have a lot of time to get to know the player like you once did years ago when I first started. Before, you would talk to a guy for months before a decision was ever made. Now, you talk to a guy a couple times and they're making decisions. So it does make it very difficult. I learned something years ago from Coach Wally Kincaid, who was a legendary coach at Cerritos Junior College. And he talked about the three players. There's the one player, the number one player, that he's all about himself. As a coach, those are easy guys to figure out. And those are easy guys to figure out right there. The number two guy is the team. That's the one that destroys the team. That's the one that to your face acts like he's all about the team, but behind the scenes, he's really all about himself. Okay? Those are the team destroyers right there. The number three player is the player that's all about the team. Those are the guys that are easy to coach, okay? It's the 1 and 3s that you want. The guy that's all about himself, you can maybe change him a little bit. The 3 guy, you don't need to change him much. You just got to get him better. The 2 guy is the one, which we see a lot now in recruiting, that comes across in the recruiting process. I want to come there. I want to help that program be better. But in reality, all he's thinking about is the light at the end of the tunnel. I want to go through there as fast as I can because I want to get to professional baseball. So it is a very tough task to do. And I'll say this. One of the things that every stop I've been at, Jeff, is, yes, we involve the travel ball coach in the recruiting process. They're the ones that are a lot of times giving us the names and the info. But we make it a point as a coaching staff to talk to the high school coach. Because at the end of the day, he's the one that knows the individual on the inside and the outside better than anyone else. He's the one that sees him on campus. He's the one that sees him in class. He's the one that sees him at practice every day and his mannerisms. And he's going to have a lot more information than the travel ball coach that's trying to keep everyone happy and is collecting the money. Now, again, I'm not bashing travel baseball. It's been great for college baseball and recruiting, but they don't know the players as well as the high school coach. So we make it a point to include the high school coach, which I know high school coaches appreciate that because they've been kind of pushed to the side now and they're not involved as much in the recruiting process.
No question. The year that I did coach, and even now I'm an associate scout, so I go out and see high school games when there is high school baseball played up here, which there wasn't this year. But I go out and see games, and it's rare to see a college coach out to see high school baseball games. And I know that travel ball is great in a lot of ways. You get to see a lot of pitchers on a particular day, but to me there's nothing can take the place of watching a guy compete for his team when you're actually trying to win in a high school game, and especially for a pitcher that has to go deep in a game. And I guess just to see, a lot of times in travel baseball, I feel that you don't often see like someone else's best against your best, if that makes sense. Like, you're not going to see someone's number one pitcher against a hitter, because you're going to see every inning or two, you're going to see a new pitcher out there. And there are definitely some things that are lost there. Why, to go back to another thing that you said earlier, and I'll probably keep doing this because you're dropping a lot of nuggets on me that I'd like to kind of expand on. You were talking about your players now being on time for a Zoom call, and just why things like that are important. Another thing that I feel that maybe is not much of a priority as it used to be, at least before you set foot on campus, and that a lot of younger guys just in general have trouble sort of wrapping their mind around why these little things are important, why it's important to be on time when the coach says be here at this particular time, why it's not okay to show up even a minute or two late, why wearing your uniform like you're asked to wear it every day is important, like tucking your shirt in, wearing a belt, things that, like, as a high school coach, when I told all of our players that we needed to dress particular ways, they looked at me like I had lobsters coming out of my ears. And, for practice, I didn't make them do anything special, but they had to wear baseball pants with a belt. They had to wear baseball socks every day to practice. Like, I can't stand the guys that wear the baseball pants with, like, the ankle socks. And there were just certain things we wanted to do that I thought were important. But I'd like to hear it from your perspective. Just why are those things important? Why are they important enough that you're going to pay attention to them and you're going to make sure that they're done? Why is that important as a Division I head baseball coach?
Well, I'm going to just use your words. I don't think there's big things. There's a lot of little things, and a lot of little things add up to big things. And I just had this conversation the other day with one of our individuals that was struggling with doing accountability things and getting things that he's supposed to be, that he can control, done. And I said, how can me or my coaching staff or any of your teammates rely on you for anything? You're not doing any of the little things right. If you can't get on a Zoom call on time, how are you going to toe the rubber in the seventh inning with a runner on second base and be able to execute pitches and know the signs and know the looks and picks at second base? So all those little things, and that's probably the hardest thing in coaching to translate to your players, is how all that kind of works together. And sure enough, the guy that doesn't show up to practice on time or cuts weights early, that's the same guy that's going to hurt the team. And I hope at the end of this podcast, your listeners realize that I am all about the team, and I'll always be about the team. And every little thing counts about the team. And, we all want to win at the end of the day, and that's what allows us to succeed. But if you gave your best effort and everyone did all the little things right and you still didn't win, you really didn't lose that day. You just were unsuccessful on the scoreboard. And I'm a big believer in the little things, that everything matters. The way you present yourself, first impressions, the way you look, the way you act. And that's going back to the recruiting part. That's one of the best things that I love to see. Is I love to see kids go through adversity and see how they handle adversity. That's what this game is. This game's all about adversity. This is a failure game. And that's the thing. I think kids play baseball because it's cool, not realizing that the adversity they have to go is going to show their true character. That old saying that baseball doesn't build your character, it reveals your character. And I think what you go through on a daily basis and everything, and not just the actions on the field and the physical part, but it's all the other stuff that add up to it each and every day. And again, I can't speak about that enough, is that little thing. There isn't big things to me. There's a lot of little things that mean a lot more than any big thing out there.
Do you think that part of doing the little things that the coach asks you to do is about building trust within teammates? For example, if you have a rule that all the players need to be dressed in a particular way, and there's one player that wants to constantly push it and wants to kind of dress like he wants to dress. I don't know just say you had a rule on your team that everybody had to wear their pants up, right? Everybody had to have the high pants with the high socks. And one particular player would show up to practice with long pants and say, well, coach, they're too long. I I can't pull them up. It'll look ridiculous. And just one player that wants to push that. Do you think that creates a situation where other teammates would have a hard time? I know this is maybe it's too much, but other teammates will look at that one particular teammate and have a hard time trusting him or feeling like he's a part of the whole, like what makes you better than everybody else, that you can do things differently than we're all asked to do it. Do you think that can be a thing as well as just taking care of the little things and just building the trust among your teammates? Or is that...
Absolutely. That's a powerful word right there that you've said a few times, trust. And within a family, within a team, within a relationship, within a workplace, trust is a huge word, and it's a hard word to stand up to all the time. But I think the more you gain trust in people, not just your coaches, but your teammates, the farther you're going to go. And I think when you assemble a 35-man roster, to say that all 35 guys are going to trust one another or even like each other, that's kind of hard to imagine. But the more you can get on the trust side, the better you're going to be as a team. And I think that's one of the things as coaches, that's what a lot of kids, when you're going back to playing time and all that, a lot of kids like to point the finger, oh, the coach must not like me, this, that. The bottom line is, at the end of the day, the players make the lineups out. The coaches write the names on the lineup card, but the players are the ones that are making the lineup out on a daily basis by their actions of what they're doing. And I don't mean by taking BP and hitting 10 over the fence or throwing 95 in the bullpen. That's not what I'm saying. It's the guys that are consistent on a daily basis of doing things right, of all the little things, showing up on time, not cutting your weights, not cutting sessions and weights, not cutting your sprint short, sprinting through lines, running through the bag hard. Those are the guys that are getting the name in the lineup on a daily basis. And all the other guys that aren't, maybe it's not always that they're not quite good enough. Maybe there's something that there's a kink in their armor that they're not doing on a daily basis to stand out.
One of the best coaches that I ever coached under, a very, very successful head coach, used to say, that was one of his favorite sayings, was to say, to kind of mirror your words, was to say that I don't make the lineup, the players make the lineup. Like looking at the team, you'd say, you guys write the lineup. I don't write the lineup based on what you just said, their actions and their performance. It's not, a lot of times in the fall, you'll think, boy, we got a traffic jam at this position, and how are we going to decide who plays here? But it's usually a good problem in the fall, but by the spring, things a lot of times will sort themselves out, because one of the players will either take himself out of the running by things that he does, or another player will catapult himself in front of the other players by things that he does do that are sort of above and beyond what the other guys are doing. So that's a really interesting concept. Is that something you talk about with your team as well? I mean, you tell them that, like, is that your message to them? And if that is your message, is that your message so that you sort of set expectations for them and what you expect, and basically if you want to play in the spring, this is what's going to have to happen?
Yeah, and I'll go a little farther on that, Jeff, is that's why I think, a lot of kids, when they're making their decisions to go places, they sometimes will choose a place that maybe the competition isn't going to be as fierce, so they get an opportunity to play quicker. But I think competition actually brings the best out of you. It actually holds you more accountable to do more things right on a daily basis. I'll tell a story, I won't tell the name, but we had a situation like that at Northridge last year. We had a position that was deep and had two very talented players at a premier spot, and both players were playing to the highest of their ability, and we were getting the best out of both players. Well, then unfortunately, one of the players got injured and didn't get to start our season for the first 15 games that we played before we were canceled. And the guy who had won the position ended up not playing as well as he did when he was in that fierce competition going through the fall, because he let up a little bit because his competition had fallen by the wayside. So I think competition is always going to hold an athlete more accountable. You can look and say, well, gosh, how's this going to sort itself out? But sometimes it'll tell the story for you. Because sometimes people will rise to the occasion of the competition, and sometimes people will falter to the competition just because the adversity gets to them too much. So I think you can find a lot of times who your true champion is out of that mix by having a fierce competition. I think we have the luxury of having that now in our second year. Going into our second year in Northridge, we've got depth at every position. So I believe the cream will rise to the top when it's all said and done, because the competition is going to be so fierce, unlike it was maybe in year one for us.
With that in mind, and just knowing what your players are having to do right now to kind of catch people up that are listening to this, because a lot of colleges are handling things differently in the fall of 2020. Your players are not at home. No, they're not on campus right now. Your players are at home. They are having to prepare basically on their own. I mean, of course, your staff is laying out a plan for them, but they're having to do things on their own. And if they're going to get better, it's going to happen by their own volition, as opposed to a coach kind of being the motor behind it. But you mentioned, I mean, you said earlier that you like to see how players handle adversity, and you think that baseball reveals the character of a player over time. And certainly your players are going through some adversity right now because they're at a disadvantage compared to a lot of other schools, if you choose to look at it that way, because a lot of other schools are practicing on campus in person right now, and your players are not. What do you expect to see at the end of all this with your players? You know, eventually you will be on campus with your players, and some of them will have gotten better, and some of them probably will have gotten worse, and some will be at about the same spot you saw them before. Some will be in better shape physically, some will be in worse shape physically. Some guys will look like different players because they'll put on 15 or 20 pounds of muscle, and other guys will look the same as they always have. What do you expect to learn from your own players through this time of adversity, where they're forced to be at home working on their own for an extended period of time? While they have some guidance from your staff, they also don't have someone there every day to push them. They're going to have to be their own motivator here.
Well, I expect, to be honest with you, there's a couple of things I expect. I expect that it'll allow us as a coaching staff, without seeing our guys physically, to be able to make quicker decisions, because when we see our guys, we'll see right away who had the work ethic and was able to fight through this time of maybe not having the ability to have a field to work out on, have a gym to go to, because the way California shows shut down. But on the other side of it also, I have no less of expectations of us being as good as we can be as I would have if we would have had fall practices. And as of right now, we're not having fall practices as of this moment. We still are going to be as good as a team as we can be. We're not going to use it as an excuse of why other programs got to have a fall workouts and we didn't, and that's why we got off to a slow start, or maybe we didn't have as good as a season. No, we will still maximize this team's ability to the best we can of what we're doing. And what we're doing right now is it's all more through Zoom, and it's learning the game. It's not doing it physically, but it's talking through a lot of situations. Older guys are helping educate younger guys, and what they've learned through their 3 years and what they could have wished they would have known as a freshman. So I think it's slowing the game down, and that word's used a lot. The game speeds up for people when they get to from high school to the collegiate level, and I believe it's going to slow. The game's going to still speed up on guys. It does every year, but I believe it's going to slow the game down because, see, we don't have results that we're dealing with right now. We're not worried about taking BP or ground balls or throwing bullpens or getting our workout in the bases and all that. We're learning the game, and I think that's one thing, going back to everything we've talked about, is that the game has become too much of the physical part and less of the mental part, and learning the game and becoming a student of the game. And I believe our team will be smarter and better because of all the hours we're spending on a daily basis and a weekly basis of going over the game and learning situations and watching video and seeing stuff we're doing. So when we go out to the field, it'll be slower than it normally would, and we'll be a better team for it. So we're maximizing everything we can. It isn't a perfect world, but it's not a perfect world anywhere. But I hope at the end of the year we can sit back and tell the story. This is a team that didn't do anything together until January, and look what we were able to accomplish. That's the way I'm looking at it. There's no other way for me to even look at it besides that.
Right. You've got a choice of how to look at it. So does your coaching staff and your players. And the more positive you are about it, the more positives you can find in this situation, the better off that the whole team is going to be. How do you, just kind of something that you sort of very, very briefly touched on there, but I think that would be important to bring up or valuable to talk about a little bit? You've been a part of so many good teams, and I think that the leadership that develops on any particular team, having players that become leaders on any particular team, that can have a big influence on what the team ends up doing, and whether or not your players can sort of come together as a group, or whether there are several cliques that don't necessarily mesh with one another. How big of a deal do you think it is that your players? Let me phrase that a little bit differently. On the best teams that you've been a part of as a coach, does it matter how well the players mesh with each other, particularly like off the field? I think a lot of people will look at a team and think that the best teams, like they're good friends off the field. They hang out, they do things together. But other teams that I'm sure that you've been a part of and I've been a part of, the players don't necessarily love each other off the field. But is it enough to respect each other's work on the field? Like, from what you've seen in the teams that you've coached, does it matter how the players view each other and their relationship off the field? Does that translate onto the field, or have you seen that's not that big of a deal? What matters more is how they work together, how much they respect each other on the field, and that's going to be enough to carry a team, to achieve what you think they can, or even more than that?
I think relationships and friendships are important, but not as much as the respect when they get on the field together. As you know, everyone's wired a little differently, and when you have a team of 35 players, I don't think you're going to see eye to eye with everyone. It's no different than a family. You may have brothers and sisters, and you love them all, but you don't love them all the same, and you maybe don't get along with one more than the other. But when you come under the same roof, you're still a family, and you're pushing all for one common goal. I think it's the same thing as the team. You're not going to maybe have the same likes of everyone on the team. You may not get along with everyone on the team off the field, but when you're on the field, you're going to have a mutual respect, and you're in for one common goal. So, yeah, I've seen that more and more. I think leadership is a powerful word that is harder nowadays than ever before. As a coach, I would love to be the orchestrator with my staff of what the rules are and how we're going to go about things in the scheme. But I would love to have a team that is a player-led team that holds each other accountable. Because at the end of the day, Jeff, I don't know what's going on every single minute of the day with our players. I don't know what's going on in the apartment or the dorm. I don't know what's going on every day in the weight room, who's cutting corners. I don't know what's going on in the right field corner when they're working on PFP stuff or working on their drive mechanics. But I think the players all do. That's the one thing I think players are geniuses. They know everything that's going on within the team. And the more players, and it's not a cool thing to be anymore. It's not a cool thing to hold players accountable. If you're a player yourself, that's not the cool thing to do these days. But I think the more you have guys hold guys accountable, the better you're going to be as a team. We talked the other day, and we let our players talk a lot on the Zoom. We don't want it just to be all the coaches talking all the time. We want our players to learn from each other, because I think a lot of times they pick up more from when their players are speaking than the coaches. And I had one of our players say, who's in his last year as a pitcher, and he made the comment, he says, if you're not passionate about everything you do on the field, then it's probably not best to be around me very much. And I thought that was very proper. He didn't say it in a demeaning way. He's a very passionate guy at what he does on a daily basis on the field. He's one of our leaders, and for me, it carried a lot of weight. If you're not going to be passionate about being out on the field, because the opportunity, we take for granted that opportunity. Well, we got to go to practice today. There are a lot worse things in this world than what you can be doing than going to a practice with 34 other teammates and with a common goal in mind. And I loved his words with that. If you're not passionate, then I really don't want to be around you very much. And I think that's a great thing. That's what you need. You need this game where there's not enough players that are passionate to play. We talk a lot about the why. Why are you playing? Is it because someone wants you to be playing? Is it because it looks cool to play? You've got to have a why you're coaching. And I know I have a why you're playing. I know I have a why I'm coaching. I want to make people better. I want to bring people together. I want to have one common goal and I want to see people succeed. Again, I'll be judged by the scoreboard, by people on the outside, but I want to be judged by what I'm doing to help people become better people and succeed in baseball along the way.
One or two more questions, Coach, and then we can wrap this up. But just to kind of finish this part of the conversation, I think that a difficult question in today's baseball, the way that the game is played now and the way that players interact with each other and the way that a lot of players play together, players from different teams play together in summer ball and they're kind of friends, and guys are afraid to say things to their teammates. Sometimes they're afraid to hold each other accountable, as you just said, because it's an uncomfortable thing to do for a lot of players. How do you, a guy that's been around the game for a very long time and had, again, an incredible amount of success, which is why I was so excited for this podcast, how do you define a good teammate? What are the characteristics of a good teammate?
I could probably sum that up in one word: selfless. Just being selfless. Work ethic, but I think selfless kind of covers it all. I mean, it isn't about them. It's about helping their teammates get better, along with them getting better too. But, selfless could go to how you're taking at your at-bat. Are you thinking about your numbers, or are you thinking about taking an at-bat for the team? Are you trying to make a pitch to strike a guy out, or are you trying to make a pitch to lower your pitch count total over the course of the game? It's just that selfless mindset that the player needs to have, and guys have to be taught that to some extent. And sometimes it's hard to be taught that. It's hard to be taught how to be selfless, because so much of us have been brought up to be selfish, that it's about us. And it's I think we live in a generation now, a society now that I know when I grew up, and I'm much older, I'm in my mid-50s, that when we got in a car, I just sat in the back seat. I don't even know if I wore a seatbelt, to be honest with you. And it's like we've put kids in a bubble now, and it's all for the right reasons. It's all for the right reasons, but it makes them feel like they're more important than everything else. And so as a coach, you've got to be able to find a lot of selfless guys that are going to give that the team always comes first. And I know there's that old cliche, there's no I in team, and we've used that before, but team carries a lot of weight, and nobody realizes that much more is accomplished through many others involved than just you. And that's a hard thing to teach guys, and those are the guys you want to find. But selfless is the word that I would use. It's the strongest word that I could use.
In your estimation, how do good teammates interact with each other? So, for example, if that player that you just mentioned that said to his other teammates that if you're not going to be passionate about what you're doing in the field, then it's better that you're not around me. How do good teammates interact with one another, particularly in a situation where a teammate realizes that another teammate is not giving something his best effort? Because I think, and I'm asking this question, it might be a difficult one, but I'm asking this question because I think that, and I don't know if it was any different, 20 or 30 years ago, but players now I think have a hard time calling a teammate out for not doing the best they can. Everybody, the guys want to be friends with each other. Guys want to, they want their friend to like their Instagram post that they're going to post after the game. They're more worried about that than they are of trying to create the atmosphere that you need to be able to win whatever you're trying to win, the state championship, your conference championship, whatever it is. How do good teammates interact with each other from your experience?
I think without being cutting or demeaning, it's just being truthful. Being truthful, and you've heard the old saying, the truth hurts sometimes, and it should hurt, because it should be a little painful, because someone's telling you something you need to get better at. And I think just being truthful, and I know myself and my coaching staff try to do as good as a job as possible of being very truthful with our guys and upfront with our guys, and there's no hidden agenda. And if a guy needs to get better in a certain area, we're going to tell them that, and we're not trying to cut them down that they're not good. We all know everyone has their shortcomings somewhere, but just being truthful with them and honest with them. And sometimes it's how it's received too, and it's how it's received by the person that has to take Because I think the mindset happens a lot, Jeff, is that when they see someone maybe cutting themselves off in weight, maybe not run the ball out hard, and if someone didn't see it, or cheating themselves some way, I think the mindset of today's athlete is, well, that's okay because that means I get to pass them up. But in the end, if he's your teammate, that's going to come back to haunt you. And we go back to that word we used at the start of this podcast, the game knows. The game knows. And somewhere along the line, the game's going to find that guy. If he's on the team, somewhere he'll contribute or try to contribute to the team, and the game's going to punish him at that moment. And it's amazing, and you know, being a baseball guy yourself, you watch Major League games, you watch a college game. I was at my son's game the other day, and he hadn't played third in a couple years. And the coach put him at third to showcase his ability. Where do you think the first two balls were hit in that next inning?
Ball finds you, right?
Yeah, to third base. And that's where the game knows. The game's going to find you. And I'm not saying my son was cheating himself, but the game's going to find you. Okay, you haven't played this position. Let's see how you react to it. That automatic adversity. So I think just being truthful, because, again, like I said, players sometimes they get selfish. Well, that's not going to affect me. That's only hurting him. But in the end, it's hurting your team. So it's better to come out and say, hey, I saw you only did 8 reps. We're supposed to be doing the strength coach wants us to do 10. That's being truthful, because in the end, that's going to help you as a team. It might not help you personally, but it's going to help the team, which is always the first thing that's the most important.
This has been great, really great stuff. This is Dave Serrano, everybody. He's the head coach at Cal State Northridge. He has one of the best resumes you'll find. We didn't even get to talk about some of the guys that you've coached under, Augie Garrido, George Horton, other guys you've coached alongside. Maybe we'll have to have a second podcast. There's probably enough. You've got enough stuff going on in your head and enough on your resume to probably have 4 or 5 podcasts here. But I feel very blessed to have had you on today, Coach Serrano, and I just want to thank you for all the time and everything you share with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, and I would love and I'd be honored to be able to do this again with you. And I love talking baseball with baseball people, and I really enjoyed myself today. So thank you for having me on this.